Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Was Steve Jobs right in that all netbooks are terrible at everything that they do, and whether the tablet is the ultimate form factor to exist between smartphones and laptops? So today we have one of the ultimate showdowns. We have a modern day netbook versus a baseline iPad. So we're going to go through several different types of tests. On the initial iPad keynote, Steve Jobs mentioned that in order for a device to exist in this category between smartphones and laptops, these devices have to do a few things really well. So some of those things include browsing, email, photos, video, music, games, and ebooks. So we're going to do some tests in each one of those categories and find out who's the winner. Okay, so what I have here on both devices is that I have loaded their default browsers. On the CHUWI Minibook X, I have Edge loaded. On the 10th gen iPad, I have Safari loaded. I've put up several different types of websites that are identical on both browsers, and we're just going to take a look at each one and kind of get an impression of which device offers the better browsing experience. So the first thing I want to mention about the CHUWI device is that it's a 16:10 aspect ratio. That means that you have a wide display but a shorter height. So when you're browsing through different websites, you may see a lot of content widthwise, but you're going to see less in terms of the height. Whereas on the iPad, you'll see less widthwise, but what's more important is that you see more of the website at any given time because of the height. This has a 4:3 aspect ratio. So let's look at a different website, such as The Verge. So if you look at these two screens right here, you can see that on the iPad, you actually see more text on the heading on that Deadpool and Wolverine picture compared to the Minibook X. Now, there are some other little things as well that make the browsing experience on the iPad better, at least with Safari versus Edge. So for example, if you just look at the image right here, all you see is the website. You see the URL at the top, just barely. But all you see is content. Whereas on the Edge browser, you see all kinds of stuff. And I do want to say that these things can be hidden, but this is what you would see on a stock machine. So you still see your taskbar at the bottom. Edge has these apps on the side that automatically load, and then you see the full URL bar and all your tabs. So everything is accessible, but it becomes a distraction from your browsing experience. So in terms of browsing, I would say that you have a better browsing experience on an iPad versus the netbook. So the next thing I want to talk about is email. We're using the default email apps on both devices. And in this category, I'm not going to talk too much about it because I feel like you can access email on both devices just fine. I don't really see any advantage from one to the other. So I'm going to have to call this one a tie. I think there might be some bias if you like Outlook a lot or if you like the default mail app on iOS, but both get the job done. So let's call it a tie. So the next category we have is photos. These are both the stock photos apps. iOS has a really great photos application. The default on Windows is okay. It's laid out in the same manner, but if you just look here, I chose the small option in terms of displaying photos, and just in terms of what you're able to see or the number of photos you're able to see, you can see a lot more on the iPad versus the netbook. And I know that part of this is personal preference, but I think the overall way that iOS presents all their pictures is just much more interesting and a lot easier to find your content compared to the standard Windows app. So for this one, I'll have to give another point to the iPad. Next, we have video playback. So I'm just going to use YouTube as an example. So both displays are on their brightest settings. Audio is about a third of the way up. So we're going to listen to each one at a time and see which one offers a better experience.
Welcome to Scrapyard Wars, where Luke and I compete to build the best computer on a fixed budget.
Okay.
Welcome to Scrapyard Wars, where Luke and I compete to build the best computer on a fixed budget.
All right, so really quick, the audio on the iPad is much better. We'll get into it more once we do a quick music test, but it sounds way better on the iPad. This one sounds more hollow. In terms of the image quality, image size, they're about the same. The display on the CHUWI Minibook X is really nice. So I would have to call that a tie. But other than image quality, the audio on that little clip, much better on the iPad. So we're gonna do another video test. We're just gonna watch an 8K video, maybe something more vibrant. All right, let's play this blue bird. All right, and weirdly enough, when I tried to choose the quality setting, and again, this is in browser, so Safari versus Edge. On the netbook, there's an option to choose the 8K option, but for some reason, I can only go up to 4K on the iPad. So let's just watch both of these at 4K. I'm going to increase the volume here. We'll go halfway. All right, we're going to try that same video on the iPad. So you can see that both images are really nice, but again, audio, the one on the iPad is way better. So I guess just in terms of video quality, I'll call this a tie for now. Let's move on to music. Alright, so we're on a website called Epidemic Sound for music. I pay for a subscription for this, so that way this music won't get flagged in the video. I set the volume to about 75% on both devices, so we're just going to play a song about 10 seconds, 15 seconds through. Alright, we're going to play the same track on the iPad. Alright, so the more I'm testing these devices, at least with sound quality, the iPad completely blows away the Minibook X. The sounds are richer, they're deeper, they're fuller. This one sounds a lot more hollow. Yeah, definitely no comparison here. iPad gets the point. Alright, next we're gonna compare the factory gaming experience on each of these devices, or at least what's available. So when I type in games, these are the type of games that you're gonna see on a Windows-based device, or in this case, the CHUWI Minibook X. You have a lot of pretty basic games, and a lot of these are very standard to Windows. So you have things like Solitaire, Minesweep, pretty basic games. Whereas on the iPad, you have Apple Arcade, which is full of all kinds of cool stuff. So I'm not gonna get into the actual playability of these devices and how strong they are. Obviously this is a netbook, so it's not gonna support AAA level games very well. But just in terms of what you have available to you, I think the iPad's gonna win this round. Alright, let's talk ebooks. So the Windows device doesn't actually have a default app for ebooks, whereas the iPad does, so it has a books app. So what you would have to do on the Windows device or a netbook is look in Microsoft Store. When I typed in books, there were some apps that came up. So there's all kinds of different apps that you can download to read on this device. However, the nice thing about the iPad and iOS is it comes default with a really nice reading app, which is the books app. So in here, you have an entire store of books that you can shop from. You have your own library books, and they even have the audio bookstore on the same app. So all these different types of ebooks in different forms are under one store, which is really nice. And I don't see that option on here. Now, in order to make this comparison as equal as possible, let's try to open something like an EPUB file. So I actually tried downloading an EPUB file to make the comparison more fair. When I open the EPUB file, it automatically loads into the books app on the iPad. So this is one of the new books I'm reading. It's called Pocket Full of Dough. When I tried to do the same thing with the netbook-based machine or Windows, there's no default app that will open an EPUB file. So they listed a couple different strategies here. I tried the simplest one at the top, which is Microsoft Edge, but then I quickly ran into problems. For some reason, it would just download the file over and over again rather than open it. So just from an experience standpoint, the iPad makes it much easier. It automatically detected a file in one of its default apps, and I was able to open it and get going. Even when I interact with it, you have this really nice page turning effect on it. Whereas on the netbook, I wasn't even able to load it yet. So I'm sure if I spend a little bit more time, I can figure it out and get the exact app to open the file. But just a straight out-of-box experience, iPad scores another point. Alright guys, so I don't even know how many points that was. I'll have my editor put up the final scores on the screen here. But I think most of the results ended up being either a tie for certain activities, or the iPad scored the point for some of those activities. So I hate to say it, but I think Steve Jobs was right in saying that netbooks are basically laptops that just do a worse job at different tasks. I think the iPad and tablets in general are pretty amazing in this category between smartphones and full laptops. They offer a way to interact with content, but in a different way. You can still do a lot of the tasks on a device like this, but I think a straight out-of-the-box experience without having to do too much research in getting apps to work or compatibility issues. I feel like the iPad does a great job at that, where you don't have to customize or tweak things too much to get things just working. Now, and even though I think Steve Jobs was right in that if you're looking for a device between a smartphone and a laptop, it's probably going to be a tablet like an iPad. But one thing we didn't look at is form factor. And I think there might be a market for people that still prefer a tiny laptop form factor.